I'm going to begin my story in 1977. I was a graduate student in clinical psychology at the University of Michigan. And I was introduced to Zen training by a fellow graduate student who was from Hawaii, who had trained, actually lived at this Zen temple. It's in Honolulu. He introduced me to his teacher. That man became my teacher. In some ways, the rest is history. When I got my first instruction in Zazen, and I assume most of you know what Zazen is, Zen meditation, seated meditation. The instructor kept on repeating over and over and over again to breathe with your Hara. Now, I thought I knew what that meant through my study of the Japanese martial arts. And I was aware of the fact that the Hara in Japanese referred to the lower abdomen, in that it is seen as the seat of Japanese say ki, Chinese chi. But the problem that I had is I had no idea how to breathe with my Hara, and it turned out to be a very frustrating challenge for me. In Japanese temples, in Zen temples, Zazen is serious business. The head monk, Japanese called the Jikijitsu, will get up periodically and do an inspection of the people who are sitting. He carries with him a big stick called a keisaku. He will make rounds, and part of it is there's a ritual where he'll bow in front of you and he will wrap you on the back 3 times on each side, and then that's to relieve cramping from prolonged sitting. Also helps focus the mind. And he has the option, he will lean over and give you feedback. And this scenario was played out hundreds, thousands of times for me. I'd hear the Jikijitsu coming, I'd hear the rustling of his robes when he stood up, and I hear the patting of the feet, and sometimes I hear him, whacking other people, and then come to me and bow. Whack, 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 one side. Whack, 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 the other side. Then he'd lead over and he'd go, breathe with your Hara. But I couldn't do it. So I tried all kinds of things, breathing differently, changing my posture. It was a brick wall. And this went on. I'm a little embarrassed how long it went on. It was months and months, if not almost, well, it was easily over a year. But then one day, it happened. And in my experience, it happened suddenly. It happened instantaneously. It happened literally from one breath to the other. I can still recall the bodily sensation. And just briefly, I had a very bad day at work. I had gotten into a fight with my boss. And in those days, I had moved to Toledo, Ohio. We had built a Zen center in Ypsilanti, Michigan, if anyone knows that lay of the land. About an hour and 15-minute, hour and a half. See someone smiling there. Hour and a half drive. And I had that much time to stew about what happened to me over the day, during that day, and how wronged I felt by my boss. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. So when I got out of my car an hour and a half later, whatever it was, to go to evening sitting, I was in a foul mood. Then I went in and changed. We had a room for changing. And I remember telling my fellow students what had happened to me over the day, and I got into a lather. It reached a crescendo. The more I talked about it, the angrier I got. And then all of a sudden, and again, I want to stress, suddenly, from one breath to the other, it was as if something popped. It's the best way I can put it. I felt that my center of gravity dropped. I could feel elasticity in my lower abdomen I have never felt before. So it's like I was breathing abdominally. Tension came out of my upper body. And it wasn't just physical. All this stewing about my feeling wronged over the day just disappeared, and I felt great. And I remember as I walked down the hallway to go to the room where we did meditation, I felt grounded in this new kind of way. I remember feeling like a tank walking down the hall, and it's almost like energetically I was pushing against the walls. Now, I went in, I took my seat at the cushion, and then it hit me. I found my Hara. Now, I never went back to where I was before that. This was, I assume, a permanent change. A long time has gone by. And in many ways, my Zen training from that point on became an elaboration of this initial experience. So a question of deepening, refining, making breath more subtle, a number of things, technicalities. But it stemmed from that one time. But since then, I've become fascinated with this concept of Hara. I've tried to learn as much as I can about it. Admittedly, there's not a tremendous amount in English on it, but I've done my best to learn as much as I can. I've come to view Hara as the point of intersection between three dimensions of the human experience: physical, psychological, and spiritual. Let me talk about these. Physical. Actually, I've already talked about that. Hara refers to the lower abdomen. And I put this here. This is a photograph of a statue of Hote. You know Hote? If you've been to a Chinese restaurant and there's a Buddha with a predominant belly and you rub him for good luck, that's Hote. Chinese is Bute or Butai or Pute. I'm used to the Japanese vernacular. And he's portrayed this way with a very predominant abdomen. And a lot of people look at him, well, he's fat and jolly. But from the standpoint of Hara development, for people who've been through that, they're going to look and say, no, he has a very prodigious Hara. And that's where he gets these qualities of being the laughing Buddha. Let me segue into that to psychological perspective. In Japanese, there are a number of expressions that deal with the psychological significance of Hara. And my source here is there's a book called Hara, The Vital Center of Man. Some of you might be familiar with it. It is the seminal work on Hara it was originally in German, in English. And they have a whole chapter on these. I recommend it. So, for example, in English, we might say someone has a big heart. Means, what does that mean? Big heart. Generous. Yeah, compassionate. In Japanese, you might say a person has a big hara. Big belly, okay. In English, you can say someone lost their head. Okay, what does that mean? I'm sorry? Yeah, ungrounded. They get carried away with emotion. You usually think about anger, like myself in the car years ago. In Japanese, you might say that person's hara rose. And sometimes we'll say, more colloquially, that person lost his or her hara. Now, when I first learned about these terms, I thought that they were metaphoric. Someone doesn't really lose their head when they fly off the handle. And someone with a big heart doesn't have a medical condition, whatever that's called. You get very serious. But I came to see through my training that this is not just metaphor. It is not metaphorical. That through the waxing and waning of the condition of hara, one's psychological state is changed. In some ways, it allows someone to keep from being carried away by emotion, for example. Other expressions are talk about the person who has finished his or her hara, and that means finished developing his or her hara. That conveys maturity, like a wise, mature individual has finished his or her hara. A related expression is the person who has not finished his or her hara, in other words, finished this development, is not fit for leadership. In Japanese, hara connotes gravitas, both physically and psychologically. Now, from the spiritual perspective, in order to understand the relationship, the significance of hara from a spiritual perspective, it's important to know the term samadhi. In my tradition of Zen, we don't talk about mindfulness. We talk about samadhi. And I'm sure a lot of you know it, but I'll give you my take on it. Samadhi, it's a Sanskrit term. No good single English translation of it that I know of. Usually translated as concentration. And you can think of it as a continuum from trivial forms of concentration, for example, the flow state of a kid playing a video game, all the way to really very deep spiritual experiences, to the point where one loses the boundary, the self-other boundary, where you're concentrating so much you get absorbed in it. And in fact, absorption is sometimes used as a definition for samadhi. I chose this picture here. This is the man I eventually went to Japan to study with, Hara sensei. He was a Zen priest, and a master of Kyudo, Japanese archery. If you have read the book Zen and the Art of Archery, that's what it's about. If you haven't read it, read it. It's been called the most significant book on Zen ever to appear in West. It's very short. It's a lyrical account of German philosophy professors studying this art in Japan in the 1930s. Hand, yes.
Oh,
yes.
Repeat the question when I ask the question?
Yes. The question is, what's the difference between satori and samadhi? Roughly, satori is enlightenment. Think of the big Zen experience as satori. Samadhi, and actually, great segue, and that's where this comes in. In our tradition of Zen, samadhi, this intense concentration at a very deep level, is a precursor for the Zen experience. So the depth of the samadhi really determines that. It's sort of a simplification, but might be helpful. And the depth of samadhi is determined by breathing. So it is the Hara breathing that drives or creates the samadhi. So you can look at Hara breathing, samadhi, concentration, and this big experience as being one and the same, or they're related in that way, not one and the same, but being related that way. Okay, there are traditional means of Hara development. One is zazen, Zen meditation, serious, rigorous Zen meditation. The other is intense training in the martial arts. But it should be clear from my story, it's not an easy thing. I had a very long period of being quite frustrated by this. And in fact, to the point of various times thinking, this is all a hoax, there's no such thing. You know, at some time they're going to say, oh, the emperor has no clothes. And it wasn't until I had that breakthrough experience. So particularly when I started to teach Zen, I tried to look at, are there ways to accelerate this in the students to basically avoid some of the frustrations I went through? Both, they have that initial, what I call finding the Hara or discovery of Hara. And maybe I was just a particularly recalcitrant student. But then also, once someone has had that initial experience, how do you deepen it? Are there ways to accelerate that? So that gets to the theme today. Is it possible to hack the Hara? One of the things that I have found helpful in this regard is this device here called a Hara meter. I'm going to put this here. Okay, what is this? This is there is a basically blood pressure cuff bladder in here. I'm going to put it on. With the meter from the blood pressure cuff, this is my demonstration model. I'm going to put it on here. I'm going to tie it tightly around my lower abdomen, like so. And I'm going to pump it up. So, same as your doctor does. And you'll notice that already the meter goes up, okay? And that's just because I'm pumping the pressure up here, the pressure drives the gauge. Keep in mind, when we look at this, that the numbers here have no absolute significance. It's not like blood pressure, where we can define healthy and unhealthy ranges. The level of the dial here will depend on a number of things, including how tightly I tied it, how much I pumped it up. We're going to use it to look at the difference, the change between inhaling and exhaling. I have used this primarily over the years as a biofeedback device, and as a classical biofeedback device, in that it's giving in this case, graphical representation of physiological process. And you can use that to try and figure out, what do I do different to get the dial up? But I'm going to demonstrate this now as I talk about 3 different levels of breathing. The first one is thoracic or chest breathing. There's maximal engagement of the muscles of the upper body, the thorax, and minimal engagement of the abdominal muscles. Okay? So on the meter, I'm going to breathe thoracically, and you can challenge me here. I'm not going to look at the meter. I'm going to take a deep breath in when I raise my hand. I'll inhale. When I inhale, raise my hand. So and I assume there wasn't a whole lot of movement, maybe a little bit. Okay, let's get to the second level. It's getting there anyway. Diaphragmatic or abdominal breathing. This is now in our vernacular, belly breathing. Okay, what happens with that? Well, you have a lot of engagement of the lower abdomen. It goes in and out like a bellows. It drives the breathing that way. Just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to purposely tense my abdominal muscles, kind of like I'm doing a crunch. I call that zeroing out the meter, even though it doesn't go to zero. Okay? And then I'm going to take a deep breath in. Again, I'll raise my hand, and the dial should increase when I inhale and decrease when I exhale. Okay? I'm doing the crunch. So you should have seen motion there. Again, I didn't see it, okay? Now, abdominal breathing is much more efficient. There are a lot of reasons, we can talk about them later if you want, of why it is superior to thoracic breathing. And the third is Hara breathing. And I don't expect most people here to know about that. Hara breathing starts out, so to speak, like abdominal breathing. So from my crunch position, I'm going to take a breath in, abdomen's going to go out, but then when I exhale, it will stay out. In other words, the abdomen remains extended, expanded, whether I'm inhaling or exhaling. Okay? So people looking quizzically, let's demonstrate this. I'm going to start with the crunch. Zero out the meter. I'm going to inhale and exhale. If I relax it, comes back down, okay? So again, I didn't see the meter. What you should have seen is that it went up and then pretty much stayed. That is Hara breathing. But it took me many years, and this is part of what I'm trying to accelerate, to learn to do it through relaxation. And I've used this or variations of it for years, both for my own training and for my teachers. By the way, for sake of disclosure, I did not invent this. Some people in Hawaii did, but I've kind of now taken and run with it with their permission. As useful as I found this, for many years, I thought it would be really helpful to have a wireless version of this. This is another picture of my Kyudo teacher, Suhara Sensei. This was taken in Hawaii. This is our equipment, traditional equipment. In Kyudo, like in any of the Zen, of the Japanese martial arts, you do your moves are coordinated with Hara breathing. So raising the bow, drawing the bow, releasing the arrow are essentially all driven by Hara breathing. I thought if we can untether the meter to and the belt, it would be a great idea. That was my initial idea. So about 30 years ago, I approached, a lot of you know Richard Davidson about this, and he put me in touch with a tech guy who said he could help me with it. And what he came up with was very similar. It was a bladder he used like bicycle inner tube in a sheath with some kind of wireless dial. I don't even think probably no one here is old enough. I don't know if Wi-Fi was a term that long ago. Well, I don't know how it worked, but it didn't work very well. I don't think that I pursued it enough, shelved it, and thought over the years, it'd be nice to come back to it. As I've watched smartphone technologies emerge, thought, oh, this could really be helpful. And then I thought, and Mikey, this is what we're talking about today, but if we can have a way of doing recordings, let's say in a Zazen session, you can look at someone's progress over time. I thought that would really be helpful. So I started to re-examine this several years ago. As should be obvious from my computer savvy here, I'm not a tech person, but I was told that the University of Wisconsin Engineering School has a course sequence, biomedical engineering design, BME design. And what they do is they match up inventions from people in community, potential inventions, to teams of students. And you submit an application, which I did. And this is what I specified, that the device be light, 100 grams or less, that it be wear and tear resistant. You can do it with Zazen martial arts, take it out in the elements. That it would be small enough to fit in a pocket or on a belt, and no bigger than a deck of cards. That we can use it in the clothing we do for our training. That it be Bluetooth or Wi-Fi compatible, that's the wireless component. And that it would interface with an Android or iOS device. So I submitted it, and I was blessed. I have been paired with a dream team. These are 5 extremely talented individuals. There are times that I think I'm working with 5 superheroes. They each have their own specialty. This is the first design that we came up with. This is using electroconductive fabric. We actually had another variation of this first. But what this is, the back of it is canvas. That's a white part you can see coming through here. This is electroconductive. This is the electroconductive fabric. It's a stretchy kind of cloth that's coated with a polymer so that when it stretches, the resistance changes. So you capture that here. The circuitry is here, and this is our Arduino. They put together a 3D printed box. This is our Android interface. This is before we had Bluetooth. And it worked pretty well. This doesn't show Hara breathing, but first you have to make sure that it'll show what's happening in the lower abdomen. This is someone doing abdominal breathing. This is she's doing a good job here. This is a nice sine wave, actual recording. But there was one hitch, and that is we found that over time, the resistance degraded. The resistance changed, rather. I'm going to call those machines. It does multiple stretches over time. There's a name for it. Anyway, they put it in that and looked at the resistance. And you can see, this is ohms here over time, that it's changed. And then we figured out that the elastic was degrading, and that's what changed it. So it wasn't very durable. So we decided, we looked into having an algorithm that would adjust for that. It just seemed like a lot of work for them. So we looked at another technology. You're familiar with this kind of device? Here, I use this for my ID, and then, yeah. So this is based on the same mechanism. This has a spool, thread, and a spring. So you pull it out, and it comes back. The string potentiometer is the same thing, but it has an encoder on it. So it puts out a signal. What they did, this is our second iteration, is you can't see it here, but the thread is embedded in this stretchy fabric here. Goes around the waist. The mechanism and the Arduino is in this box. And then now we're Bluetooth Android. This works very well as well. The blue, and we're upgraded the interface a little. The blue wave is the student actually breathing. Again, nice abdominal breathing pattern. This is an aspirational sine wave curve that we can adjust, so we can adjust the frequency of it. She's matching it pretty well. Well, the question is there a biomechanical explanation for Hara breathing, or is it just mysterious? I really think that there are biomechanical reasons for it. What happens, though, is mysterious after that. So in other words, the mechanism of this creates a mystical experience. So now, we're looking at third iteration of the device, okay? We went to the manufacturer of the electroconductive fabric, and they said, well, they think the problem is that what they sell has relatively low spandex content. It's either 10 or 20%, I don't remember. They said if you use a high spandex material, you shouldn't have that degradation. They don't sell it, but they can coat any fabric we give them. So we're now looking at like 80% spandex fabrics that we're sending to them to coat. We're going to see how it works. Then we're going to have a shoot-off between the string potentiometer and whatever this other thing is. We're going to see who wins. Then this gets to the question of relative versus absolute change. So far, I've showed these sine waves. They're not showing Hara breathing. They're showing abdominal breathing. That's just easier to pilot the device. But it's a challenge. If you look at, and this is your point, if you look at someone who's breathing thoracically, level 1, and you have a band around your abdomen, there's no movement in it. Then you have someone who's Hara breathing. Once their Hara is set, there's no movement in it. How do you differentiate between the two? You're really not looking at sine waves. So we're going to have a calibration routine where you do what I just did. You zero it out, you crunch your abdomen, let it relax, and then you can define what is in the zone of Hara and look at the change from then. Is that clear what I'm saying? Okay, good. So calibration we're working on. We're going to add iOS interface. Miniaturization. We want to get this as small as we can. And then gamification, for obvious reasons. Get some games, get it interesting to develop your Hara. Our students came up with 2 here. This is a skee ball game that, how many points you get, and it's done graphically, function of your abdominal breathing. And this is, they call it cat burglar. This threw me off when I was looking at this. It's called cat burglar. It looks more like a mouse to me getting the cheese, but as your breathing progresses, it descends more and more. That should be obvious. Okay, question over there?
If you could elaborate a little bit more on why. What's in it?
Why do it? Why put yourself through it? When I met the man who became my Zen teacher, and he gave a lecture, he said that samadhi is like looking through the blades of a spinning propeller. And where I usually talk about this, we have fans on the ceiling, so easy you can do it. And you think of your thoughts. Well, all right, let me put this in a little better context. You can think of samadhi as being non-attachment, that's a Zen term, or not pursuing unnecessary thought. Okay? So the metaphor of the propeller is if you focus on a blade, you're just going to watch it. Your mind gets whipped around like that. But if you kind of step back and you see through it, you don't focus on a particular blade, you can see through the propeller or the fan, whatever it is. This is a metaphor. The way I like to explain samadhi the best is that there's a concept in Zen, and I think it comes from other forms of Buddhism. The Japanese term is nen, N-E-N, and it's translated as action or activity of the mind. And there are 3 levels of it. So the first nen is when you have, and please let me know if I'm getting too esoteric here, is when you have direct sensory awareness of something without reflecting on it, okay? And it could be any sense. It could be a sound, it could be a taste, touch, whatever. So there will be a period of time, let's say I make a noise, that you just heard that. There's no reflection. You have an immediacy to it, okay? But then what happens is you start thinking about it. You know, you hear the noise, you just heard anything, what's this guy up to? That's second nen, yeah. Okay, that's a second nen. You start pursuing, what tends to happen is a chain of associations comes after that. And you go from one thing to the other, like, what's this guy doing? I can't wait to get home, what's for dinner? And so on and so forth. That's how most people live their lives. I don't like the term monkey mind very much, but it is evocative with that. So that's, first nen is a direct experience without reflection. Second is the reflection and this chain of associations. Third nen is when you are aware that you're engaging in second nen. In other words, it's a meta level. So what happens is you hear the noise, you start thinking, what's this idiot doing? So on and so on, and it goes there. Then you go, wait a minute, I'm really distracted here. Okay, so I'm going to go back and try and get to this direct experience without reflection. This is what happens in Zazen, in that we give someone something to focus on, and for initial stages is counting the breath. And They count their exhalations from 1 to 10. And then at some point, they're going to get distracted. They start thinking about life, whatever it is. And then another time, and then another point, they're going to, wait a minute, I've lost the count. I'm distracted. That's third level. Then they will want to come back to level 1. Now, in our tradition of Zen, we say we enter the mind through the body. And the body is breathing. And I haven't stressed posture here, but you actually reset your breathing. It's pretty clear if someone is spaced out, they're not engaging in Hara breathing. So that's a partial explanation to what you're doing. So the question is, so through this state of observership, that's how you get to the state of consciousness. I will give a quick answer yes to that. There are technicalities of that, and maybe we can talk afterwards. But let me say one other thing. In a Zen tradition, there's a concept that there's a term called kan, K-A-N, and it is intuitive perception. And it comes out of samadhi as well. So you can look at maybe prajna is related to that. And that becomes critical in all the Zen arts. Diaphragmatic breathing is used a lot in relaxation. It's used in psychotherapy for anxiety disorders, stress management. But it's also used in medical settings. Treatment of asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And we're finding that's not the reason for Hara development necessarily, but we've gotten a lot of interest in medical people from this device as something that they can teach in the hospital and clinic. So that's a different issue than the samadhi question, but another use of the meter. Yes?
Have you looked at connections into the vagus nerve?
Oh, the question is, have we looked into connections in the vagus nerve? I'm fully convinced that what happens biomechanically, and I think that's it. I think that stimulation of the vagus nerve is key. I have not seen that. There might be one or two papers. If you write me, I might be able to dig them up on this. That's something that is begging to be looked at. No more questions. Let's play Hara games. Okay, so we do have exercises in our tradition, but I found them when I was coming up through the ranks. I didn't find them very helpful. I think that they are better once you're way down the road. So I want you to take a deep breath in, exhale, and contract your lower abdomen as much as you can. Once all the air is out, I want you to continue tense it, 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 tense it. Squeeze it. 3, 2, 1, release. And breathe in. Okay? And go back to breathing regularly. Okay? Pay attention to any changes. We're going to try it again. Take a deep breath in. Exhale. Crunch your abdomen. And keep on crunching it. Crunch, 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 crunch. As tight as you can. 3, 2, 1. Release. Go back to breathing. Whatever feels normal and natural at that point. This time, when you breathe out and contract your abdominal muscles, I want you to contract as many muscles of your body as you can, especially the muscles of your legs, buttocks, okay? But also hands, you can scrunch your face up. I want to get maximal tension and then let it go, okay? Any questions about that? Okay, so take a deep breath in. Exhale. Crunch your abdomen. Now crunch everything. Really, really put tension on it. Tense, 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 tense. 3, 2, 1. Release. Oh, I can hear the difference in that. Just in terms of some people can go back to breathing naturally. Do it again. Breathe in. Breathe out. Contract your lower abdomen and everything else. Tense, 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 tense. See crunched faces, scrunched faces. Okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Release. Go back to breathing naturally. Okay, we're on the right track here. I want to do some other variations just to show you. Now, this time, and I want to go, well, you can do it either way. If you want to scrunch your whole body, that's fine. If you want to just scrunch your abdomen, just don't not scrunch your abdomen. But this time, when you're scrunching, so when you exhale, I want you to come forward like that. Then when you release, as you inhale, I want you to come up like that. Okay? Is that clear? Okay, so take a deep breath in. Exhale. Come forward. Scrunch whatever you're going to scrunch. Do it really, really tight. Should be getting fatigued from these multiple repetitions. Good, 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 good. 3, 2, 1. Release, up, then go back to breathing naturally. I'm going to do this one more time. Okay? So deep breath in. Exhale, come forward. Scrunch whatever you're going to scrunch as much as you can. Wear it out. I'm going to have you do it longer. 3, 2, 1. Release. Come up. And go back to breathing naturally. So you can scrunch whatever you want to scrunch. And when you release it, okay, you're going to take breath in. And then, at the peak of your inhalation, I want you to see if you could feel the tug of gravity. Just if you go with the tug of gravity pulling against your lower abdomen, if that can start to drive your exhalation. Okay? This is conceptually might be a little difficult, but you don't want to force it, but just see, you're going to take your breath in, and then just feel the weight of gravity pulling it down. We'll try this a couple times and then see. Okay? Questions? Okay, ready? Inhale. Exhale. Scrunch whatever you're going to scrunch. If you're cramping, don't overdo it. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Breath in. Okay, now just see if you feel gravity pulling your lower abdomen, and can that start to drive your exhalation? Okay, and then go back to breathing normally. Okay, we'll try this one more time. Okay, deep breath in. Exhale and scrunch. Three, 2, 1. Release. Inhale. And just feel that weight. Can that drive your exhalation? Then go back to breathing naturally. We call the transition between inhalation and the exhalation, that is the set of the Hara. It's kind of an initial, you have a choice at that point. You're going to contract it or not. But it sounds like you're getting that experience, and maybe some other people now. At that point, that's kind of the point of this particular exercise at this stage of the game. Now, this is Honda Roshi. He's one of our instructors from Hawaii. He's just a remarkable person. He teaches, in addition to Zen, shakuhachi is a Japanese bamboo flute. And his breath control is really something. Most of us, when we sit, we count from 1 to 10. He times his sitting because he knows he breathes once a minute. So he'll just count the number of breaths. So wants to sit an hour, that's 60 breaths. So I got him about a year ago. You willing to take your shirt off and let's take a look at it? We had very little time to do this video because we were setting up during a retreat. I've really enjoyed this. You're a great group, and I appreciate the opportunity. My goal is to make Hara a household word. Okay? So thank you. And thank you again, Mikey. Thank you.